The night he couldn't forget. The night began with a small feeling that Keanu couldn't ignore, a feeling that something important was about to happen, something he could not prepare for even with all his years of calm and control. He stood by the window of his quiet home, watching the soft city lights glow like tiny fireflies in the distance, and he realized that his heart had been restless all day. He tried to distract himself with reading, with music, with simple tasks, but nothing worked. The thought of Sandra kept coming back, not loud, not dramatic, but gentle and steady, like a whisper that only he could hear. He didn't know why that night felt different, he only knew it did. Keanu had always been a man of respect and humility, someone who carried his emotions quietly, almost secretly. But on that evening, his feelings were no longer soft shadows inside him. They were warm, steady lights, asking him to do something he normally avoided, something bold. He remembered the years of friendship, the late-night conversations on sets when everyone else was asleep, the silence between them that never felt heavy, the way she laughed with her whole heart. He remembered the way she had once looked at him, not as a star, not as an icon, but as a human being who was trying his best. That memory alone made his breath slow and his chest tighten. He walked to his small kitchen, not fully knowing what he was doing, and began preparing something he had not done for anyone in a long time. He cooked dinner, simple and warm, the kind of food that feels like comfort, the kind of meal that says everything words cannot. He lit soft candles around the room, not expensive ones, just the ones he kept for quiet nights. He dimmed the lights, letting the golden glow settle gently across the walls. Every detail felt like it mattered, even if he didn't understand why yet. It was as if his heart was guiding him without asking permission. As he arranged the table, he felt a sudden wave of doubt. He wondered if this was foolish, if he was reading too much into the feeling, if Sandra would think he had crossed a line. She had always trusted him because he never pushed, never assumed, never tried to make things something they were not. He feared risking that trust more than anything. So he paused, leaning against the counter, closing his eyes as he tried to breathe through the uncertainty. His hands trembled a little, something that almost never happened to him. But even in the doubt, something inside told him to continue because the night was not about perfection. It was about honesty. Then his phone buzzed, one message, one line. "Are you home? I really need to talk." The moment he saw her name, Keanu felt the room shift. The feeling he had been fighting all day suddenly made sense. It wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless. It was a connection he couldn't explain, the kind that happens only when two people think of each other at the exact same moment without planning it. He stared at the message for a long second, feeling a mix of worry and something deeper, something he didn't want to name yet. He typed back slowly, "Yes, come over, I'm here." As he hit send, a soft knock came at the door far sooner than he expected. His heart jumped. She was already there. Sandra had come without waiting for his reply, as if she somehow knew he would say yes. He walked toward the door, each step heavy with emotion, unsure of what he would see on the other side. But when he opened it, everything inside him shifted. Because Sandra stood there with tears in her eyes, but also with a look he had never seen before, a look that changed the night completely. The moment she finally broke, the first thing Keanu noticed was her breathing. It was uneven, as if she had been holding everything inside for too long, and now the weight had finally become too heavy to hide. Sandra stood in the doorway, her eyes glossy with the kind of pain people try to swallow for weeks before it spills over. Keanu didn't speak right away. He didn't ask what happened. He simply stepped aside gently, giving her space to walk in, giving her silence that felt safe instead of sharp. As she entered the warm, softly lit room, Sandra paused. She noticed the candles, the careful table setting, the quiet beauty he had created without expecting any visitor. Her eyes widened for a second, not because she thought it was romantic, but because she knew him. She knew he didn't prepare things like this for no reason. She felt something shift inside her, a small comfort rising through the hurt. Keanu closed the door slowly, watching her shoulders sink, as if she finally allowed herself to stop pretending she was fine. She sat down at the edge of his couch, her hands shaking a little as she tried to untangle her thoughts. Keanu walked toward her, his step soft, his presence gentle, the same calming presence that had saved her from losing herself more than once in the past. He sat a little distance away, not too close, not too far, just enough to tell her she was not alone, just enough to let her breathe without pressure. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered, her voice fragile, breaking near the end. Keanu looked at her with the kind of patience that makes people brave enough to be honest. He didn't rush her. He didn't ask her to speak faster. He just nodded, letting her take the time she needed. She wiped her face quickly, almost embarrassed by the tears, but Keanu shook his head gently, telling her without words that she didn't need to hide anything here. Finally, Sandra inhaled deeply and said the words that made Keanu's chest tighten. Someone betrayed me, someone I trusted with everything. The pain in her voice was sharp and real. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his hands loosely clasped, his eyes focused completely on her. She explained slowly, piece by piece, how someone close to her had taken advantage of her kindness, leaking private details, twisting her truth, making her feel exposed and foolish. She tried to stay strong as she spoke, but halfway through her voice cracked, and she covered her face with both hands. Keanu moved without thinking. He placed his hand over hers, not pulling them away, just resting there, giving her something steady to hold on to. She didn't push him away. Instead, she let his presence anchor her, the warmth of his hand reminding her she was still safe somewhere, even if the world outside felt cruel. "You didn't deserve that," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You deserve honesty and respect always." Those words broke something inside her, but in a healing way. She lowered her hands slowly, staring at him with a raw, vulnerable expression. Tears still clung to her lashes, but now there was something else behind them, trust. Deep trust. Keanu wasn't finished. He could feel she needed more than comfort. She needed truth. He spoke again, his voice calm but strong. "You give so much of yourself to people, sometimes too much. But that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It makes you kind, and people like that are rare." A silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was warm, full of unspoken emotion. Sandra felt her heart ease for the first time in days. She had come to him broken, unsure, trembling, but now she felt supported, understood, and stronger than she expected. She looked around the room again, noticing the soft lights, the dinner he had prepared, the calm atmosphere he had created without knowing she would walk into it. For a moment, she wondered if fate had pushed her toward him tonight. And when she turned back to look at him, something in her eyes shifted, something he felt all the way through him. "Keanu," she whispered, "why does it feel like you knew I needed you tonight, even before I came?" He froze, because he didn't know how to answer. Not without revealing the truth he had been holding back for years. The truth he never meant to say. Keanu felt the question land inside him like a quiet earthquake. For years, he had lived with the secret feeling that some invisible thread connected him to Sandra, a gentle bond that never demanded anything but always pulled him closer whenever she was hurting or whenever he sensed she was drifting away from herself. But he had never spoken about it. He had never dared to say out loud that sometimes he could feel her sadness before she even said a word, or that sometimes he woke up with the sudden urge to check on her for no logical reason. He didn't believe in dramatic destinies, but he believed in intuition, and Sandra had always lived somewhere in that quiet space inside him. Now her eyes searched his, waiting for an answer he wasn't prepared to give. He looked away for a moment, trying to calm the sudden storm in his chest. Sandra leaned closer without realizing it, reading every tiny shift in his face. She could tell he was fighting with something heavy, something honest. The room felt warmer, the silence thicker, like the air itself was listening. When Keanu finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost afraid of its own truth. "I didn't know you were coming," he said slowly. "But I've been thinking about you all day. I felt something wasn't right. I didn't know what, but I felt it." Sandra's breath caught just a little. The way he said it wasn't dramatic or romantic. It was simple, pure, real, and that made it hit even deeper. She wasn't used to people noticing her unspoken emotions. She wasn't used to someone sensing her pain before she mentioned it. All her life she had learned how to hide her feelings behind humor, behind work, behind smiles that sometimes felt too heavy to keep wearing. But with Keanu, she didn't have to pretend. He saw through everything, and not in a way that invaded her, but in a way that protected her. She lowered her gaze to her hands, suddenly shy, suddenly unsure of what to say. She felt a strange warmth rising in her chest, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel for a long time. Vulnerability, tenderness, safety. When she finally looked back at him, her voice shook as she asked, "Keanu, why do you always show up when my life falls apart?" He didn't answer immediately. He took a slow breath, the kind that comes from a place of fear and courage blended together. He moved just a little closer, not touching her, but letting her feel his presence more clearly. His eyes softened, and in that moment he looked more human, more open than she had ever seen him. "Because I care," he whispered, "more than I ever planned to." Those 6 words changed everything. Sandra felt her heartbeat echo in her ears. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. She stared at him, searching his face for something, doubt, hesitation, discomfort, but she found none. All she saw was sincerity, raw and steady, and that scared her, but also grounded her in a way she didn't expect. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "Keanu, we've been friends for so long, I don't want to lose what we have." He nodded gently, his expression warm but serious. "You won't," he said. "Not because of this, never because of this." But inside him, his heart was racing. He knew what he felt was real, deep, and honest. But he also knew Sandra had been hurt badly, and the last thing he wanted was to confuse her or push her when she was already fragile. So he tried to pull back, tried to steady himself. He told himself to be patient, to let her heal before letting emotions complicate anything. But fate had other plans. Because at that very moment, Sandra reached out and softly took his hand. The simple gesture sent warmth through him so strong it felt like the room shifted. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she didn't let go. And in her eyes, he saw a mix of fear and longing, trust and confusion, all tangled together. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I don't know what I feel right now, but I know I feel safe with you. And tonight, I don't want to be alone." His breath caught, not because of the words, but because he could hear the truth inside them. This wasn't about romance. Not yet. It was about two hearts finding a place to rest after too many storms. And yet, something deeper was already beginning to grow between them. Something neither of them could stop. The night that pulled them closer. The moment Sandra's hand rested in his, the atmosphere inside the room changed in a slow but powerful way. Nothing dramatic happened, nothing loud or overwhelming, yet the entire space felt different, as if the world outside had paused for them, letting them breathe in a moment they didn't know they needed. Keanu held her hand gently, not squeezing, not pulling, just offering steady warmth. He felt her fingers tremble, and he understood instantly that she wasn't asking for romance or promises. She was asking for a place where her heart could calm down, even if just for a night. And he wanted to be that place for her, not because he wanted something in return, but because caring for her felt natural, almost like breathing. He stood up slowly and guided her toward the dinner table he had prepared earlier. The soft candlelight created a calm glow around them, and Sandra stopped for a moment, taking in the details. She looked from the candles to the warm plates, then back to him with an expression that was both touched and confused, as if she didn't understand why someone would think of her so carefully. Keanu didn't say anything about it, didn't make it a big gesture. He simply pulled out the chair and whispered, "Sit. Eat something, you need it." She gave a quiet nod and sat down. As they ate, the silence between them felt delicate yet comforting. Sandra watched him with grateful eyes, noticing how calm he stayed, how gentle his movements were, how he paid attention without staring or making her feel exposed. Keanu spoke only when necessary, asking simple, soft questions, allowing her to share only what she wanted. Every now and then she caught him watching her, but not in a heavy or intense way. It was a look full of concern, a look that asked, "Are you all right now?" Without using a single word. Halfway through the meal, Sandra put her fork down and took a slow breath. She seemed hesitant, unsure if she should speak or stay silent. Keanu noticed instantly and leaned forward a little, his eyes meeting hers gently. That simple gesture gave her the courage she needed. "Keanu, I feel stupid," she whispered. His eyebrows lowered slightly, concern filling his face. "Why would you feel that?" She shook her head, tears gathering again. "Because I trusted someone who didn't care about me, because I let them close, because I didn't see the signs. I should have been smarter, I should have known." Keanu's expression softened in a way she had rarely seen. He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers again, warm and steady. "You trusted someone," he said softly, "because you're kind, because you believe in people. That is not a weakness, Sandra, that is strength. The world needs more hearts like yours." Her breath hitched. She wasn't used to someone turning her pain into something strong instead of something foolish. She squeezed his hand slightly, needing that stability. Keanu let her hold on as long as she needed, not pulling back, not shifting even an inch. Just when she seemed to be calming down, another wave of emotion hit her, stronger this time. Her voice cracked as she spoke again. "I keep giving people chances, and I keep getting hurt. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to protect myself without changing who I am." Keanu leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. "You don't need to change who you are, you just need people who see your value, people who don't take advantage of your softness, people who protect it." Those last words held a meaning deeper than he intended. Sandra felt it. She looked at him, tears shining, but her eyes were searching again, searching for the truth behind his tone, searching for the intention he tried so hard to hide. "Keanu, has anyone ever protected your softness?" she asked. The question struck him like lightning because he didn't expect it. Suddenly, it wasn't just about her pain. It was about his too. He hesitated, his gaze dropping for a brief moment. Sandra's heart softened at the sight. She realized he wasn't just being strong for her, he was hiding his own wounds behind quiet smiles and gentle actions. Finally, he answered, "Not many," he whispered. "I learned to do it myself." Sandra reached her hand toward his again, but this time it wasn't for comfort. It was for connection. Her touch was steady, warm, intentional. Keanu looked up, surprised by the sudden shift, and for the first time that night she smiled, not a full smile, but a small, fragile one that carried gratitude and something else he couldn't name yet. The room felt warmer again, the silence deeper, as if something inside both of them was slowly opening. Then, without planning it, without thinking too hard, Sandra whispered the words that made Keanu's breath freeze. "Keanu, can I stay here tonight? Not for romance, just so I don't have to be alone with all this." He felt his heart jump, because he knew her presence would change something inside him. And he wasn't sure he was ready, but he also knew he could never say no. The night honesty almost slipped out. When Sandra asked if she could stay, the words hung in the air like fragile glass, delicate enough to break with one wrong movement. Keanu felt something tighten inside him, a mixture of fear and tenderness because he understood the weight behind her request. She wasn't asking for comfort from just anyone. She had chosen him, not because of his gentleness, not because of his calm, but because something inside her trusted him enough to share her most vulnerable night. He felt honored, but the honor also came with a quiet ache in his chest, the kind that reminded him how much he cared. He nodded slowly, not wanting to scare her with too much emotion. "Of course," he whispered, "stay as long as you need." Her shoulders relaxed, and for the first time that night, she looked like she could breathe without fighting her own thoughts. Keanu stood up and began preparing the guest room, changing the sheets, turning on a small lamp, making sure everything felt safe and warm. He moved silently, but his mind was loud. He wondered if her staying would make his feelings harder to hide. He wondered if she would notice how seeing her in his home felt strangely natural, as if it had always been meant to happen. When he returned to the living room, Sandra was standing near the candles, touching the edge of one softly. She looked lost in thought, her back slightly turned to him, her posture fragile but graceful. He approached slowly, not wanting to disturb her, but she turned around at the exact moment he reached her. They ended up closer than expected, only inches apart. Both froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Neither spoke. Their breath synced without trying, their eyes searching each other's faces for something unspoken. Sandra looked into his eyes, slowly and deeply, as if trying to understand a truth she had been ignoring for years. Keanu felt the world soften around them, the silence pulling them closer, stretching the air into something warm and intimate. Then Sandra whispered, "You always make things feel safe." He felt his heart stumble. His throat tightened. He wanted to answer, but no words came out, because what he wanted to say was too honest, too real. Instead, he pulled in a slow breath and offered her a soft smile. But she stepped a little closer, as if she could feel the words he wasn't saying. "Keanu," she murmured, "why do you care about me this much?" He looked away quickly, his jaw tightening. He wasn't ready for this question. He wasn't ready for her to see inside him the way he saw inside her. She touched his forearm gently, trying to make him look at her. Her touch was warm, careful, but he felt it like a spark running through him. "I don't want to make anything complicated," she said softly, "but sometimes it feels like you care more than you say." His breath caught again. She was right, and she wasn't supposed to see it. He took a step back, not because he wanted distance, but because he needed control. He ran a hand through his hair, his voice shaky in a way she had never heard. "I care because you deserve to be cared for. You give so much, Sandra. You give until you're empty. Someone needs to be there when you break." She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening again. "But who's there when you break?" she asked gently. The question hit him harder than he expected. He tried to answer, but his voice disappeared. For a moment, he looked vulnerable, more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. His eyes softened, but his body looked tense, as if he had been holding years of loneliness inside him. Finally, he spoke quietly. "I've learned how to hold myself together." "That sounds lonely," she whispered. Sometimes, he admitted. Sandra stepped closer again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms around him slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. But he didn't. He let her hold him, and after a moment he wrapped his arms around her too. They stood like that in the soft candlelight, two people who had spent years protecting others but rarely themselves. Keanu felt her head rest against his chest. He felt her breathing even out. He felt peace settle over both of them. And for a second, he almost whispered the truth he had been holding for years. I care because you're the one person who... But he stopped. The words almost escaped. Almost. Then Sandra looked up at him, and before he could say anything else, there was a soft knock at the door. Late at night. Unexpected. Both of them froze. Because whoever was at the door would change everything. The moment everything changed forever. The knock sounded again, soft but sharp enough to break the silence that had wrapped itself around them. Keanu and Sandra pulled apart slowly, their breath still tangled, their hearts still racing from the moment that almost became something more. Sandra wiped her eyes gently, trying to regain her calm, while Keanu took one steadying breath before walking toward the door. Every step felt heavy, filled with questions he wasn't ready to answer. Who would come this late? And why now, at the exact moment, he almost told her the truth he had kept hidden for years. He opened the door carefully. On the other side stood a young assistant from Sandra's team, her face pale and worried. She clutched her phone like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. When she saw Sandra behind him, she exhaled with relief that was too deep to hide. I'm so sorry, the assistant whispered. I didn't know where else to find you. Something happened, and you need to see this. Keanu stepped aside as Sandra moved forward, confusion mixing with fear in her eyes. The assistant handed her the phone, her hands trembling. Sandra pressed play. A video began, shaky, secret, clearly recorded without her consent. It showed the person who had betrayed her earlier that day, but now they were lying, creating stories, twisting her words, trying to damage her name even more. The internet had already begun reacting. The comments were cruel, fast, and unfair. Sandra's face slowly drained of color. She watched in silence, her shoulders tightening, her breath becoming uneven again. Keanu stayed behind her, close but not touching, letting her decide when she needed him. When the video ended, Sandra lowered the phone, her eyes distant, her voice barely a whisper. Why do people do this to me? Why do they keep doing this? She wasn't angry, she was exhausted, defeated, the kind of tired that comes from being strong for too long. Keanu stepped closer, gently taking the phone from her shaking hands. He placed it on the table and turned toward her fully, his eyes steady, calm, and full of something unbroken. Because the world sees your light, he whispered, and sometimes light scares people who have none of their own. Her lip trembled. She closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall again. Keanu reached out slowly, giving her enough time to pull away if she didn't want comfort. She didn't. She stepped forward, her forehead resting lightly against his chest. Keanu wrapped his arms around her, strong and steady, as if he could shield her from the entire world. You are not alone, he murmured. You don't fight this alone, not tonight, not ever again. Those words sent a wave of warmth through her, deeper than any comfort she expected. She held on to him, letting herself feel supported instead of destroyed. And for the first time in a long time, she let someone else carry her pain with her. After a long moment, she pulled back slightly and looked up at him. Her eyes were soft again, tired but clearer than before. Her voice came out quiet but full of meaning. Keanu, why do you always show up for me? Why do you stay even when it gets heavy? He looked at her and he felt something inside him break open, not painfully but honestly. He couldn't hide behind patience anymore. Not after everything they had shared that night. Not after seeing her heart crack and rebuild in his hands. He took a slow breath. Because you're important to me, he said. More than you know, I don't stay out of duty. I stay because I care deeply and not just as a friend. Her breath caught, her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't look afraid. She looked relieved, as if a truth she had quietly felt for years had finally been spoken aloud. Keanu, she whispered, stepping a little closer. I think I've always known. I just wasn't brave enough to face it. He swallowed hard. She reached up, touching his face gently, her fingers tracing the quiet emotion hiding behind his calm expression. I'm not asking for answers tonight, she said softly. I'm not ready for big steps, but I'm ready to let you in, a little more than before. Keanu nodded, a slow, emotional smile forming. the kind that comes from long-held feelings finally finding a place to breathe. "That's enough," he whispered. "More than enough." The candles flickered softly, the room warm and quiet around them. Sandra leaned into him again, and this time Keanu held her not with fear, not with hesitation, but with quiet certainty. Nothing dramatic happened. No kiss. No sudden confession, just two hearts finally understanding each other after years of silence. And sometimes, that is the moment that changes everything.